Imagine waking up one day and realizing something strange about yourself, something unsettling, yet undeniably true. You're ambitious. You dream big, think bigger, and feel a gnawing hunger inside you, a drive to achieve, to conquer, to become someone great. But there's a catch. Despite all that ambition, you do nothing. You stay still. You freeze. You know it's a paradox, but it feels like a deep truth. You're torn between your aspirations and the inertia in your soul. The hours slip by, the days drag on, and yet you find yourself watching others move, act, succeed, while you remain frozen in place. It's not that you lack desire. You want success more than anything, but your feet remain planted firmly on the ground. The hunger for accomplishment consumes you, but somehow you can't seem to take the first step. This is the cruel paradox of ambition without action. You look around at people who don't seem as driven as you, yet they're moving, making strides, achieving what you only dare to dream about. It stirs something inside you, a strange sense of injustice, but also an unsettling question. Why can't you do the same? You've heard it all before. If you just worked harder, you'd be unstoppable. And yet, here you are, stuck, frozen in a state of perpetual inertia. What's wrong with you? Why does your mind race ahead, but your body stays paralyzed? Could it be that ambition itself is a trap, one that creates a false sense of possibility, but keeps you shackled in the realm of what could be instead of what is? How many times have you felt the weight of your own unfulfilled potential pressing down on you? How many nights have you laid awake, thinking about all the things you could be doing, should be doing, yet still found yourself glued to the comfort of inertia? This is a question many don't dare to ask, but you felt its weight, its urgency. If you are ambitious but lazy, if you feel the overwhelming desire to achieve but are paralyzed by an invisible force, what does that mean? What does it mean to be filled with ambition, only to remain in a state of frozen complacency? Is it a failure of character, or is it something deeper, something insidious and invisible, like an unspoken rule that exists within you, shaping your actions, or lack thereof? What if this contradiction is not your fault, but the result of something far bigger than your personal shortcomings? And more importantly, how does this paradox play out in your life? What are the consequences of having a powerful drive to succeed, yet remaining incapable of acting on it? How long can you live in this state before it starts to erode your sense of self-worth, your vision of who you could be? These questions are unsettling, yes, but they need to be asked, because beneath them lies the answer to a deeper mystery, a truth that can only be uncovered by facing the contradiction square in the face and wrestling with it, until it gives up its secrets. But to do so, you must first embrace the discomfort. You must be willing to confront what's keeping you stuck, to delve into the reasons why ambition and laziness might be two sides of the same coin. So let me ask you again, if you're ambitious but lazy, what does it mean about you? And what does it mean about the world you live in? To understand why you're caught in this strange, paradoxical trap of ambition without action, we must first look beyond the surface. It's not enough to simply say you're lazy or lack discipline. The truth is more complex, far more layered than that. What's happening in your mind, beneath your conscious awareness, is where the key to understanding lies. You may have heard the phrase, the greatest obstacle to success is fear of failure. But what if the real obstacle isn't failure itself, but the anticipation of failure, the anxiety that emerges before you even take the first step? What if your inertia, your unwillingness to act, is driven by a deeper psychological mechanism, one you're not even fully aware of? Psychologists like Carl Jung understood that much of our behavior is driven by unconscious forces. He believed that the human psyche is divided between the conscious mind and the unconscious. But it's the unconscious that holds the keys to your deepest fears, desires, and even your greatest potential. Jung spoke of the shadow, a part of your psyche that consists of those aspects of yourself that you repress or refuse to acknowledge. The shadow is where the unexpressed, the unacted upon desires live. And if you're ambitious but lazy, your shadow may be filled with the very dreams and aspirations you can't seem to manifest. They remain out of reach because you're unwilling to confront the fears that accompany them. These fears are not only about failure. They are about the very act of becoming. To pursue your ambitions means you must change, grow, and in some ways, become a different person. That's a terrifying prospect. The self you know, the one you've built over time, may be comfortable, predictable, and safe, even if it's not the self you envision as truly successful. If you step into the unknown, if you dare to become, you might lose the identity you've clung to for so long. And so you freeze. This paradox of ambition and inaction is not just psychological, it's philosophical. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most radical thinkers of modern philosophy, spoke of the concept of the Übermensch or Overman. The Übermensch is the ideal person who creates their own values and transcends conventional societal norms to reach their highest potential. Nietzsche's vision of greatness is not about mere success. It's about becoming who you truly are, breaking free from the mediocrity of herd mentality and embracing the terrifying journey of self-creation. But what if, like so many others, you don't take that leap? What if you remain bound by the comfort of your current self, unwilling to step beyond the boundaries of your familiar existence? Nietzsche recognized that such hesitation was part of the human condition. The will to power, the desire to rise above one's circumstances and limitations, is often stifled by the fear of what that might cost. To be ambitious but lazy is to be caught between these two conflicting forces: the will to power that drives you to achieve, and the fear of the unknown that keeps you paralyzed. Arthur Schopenhauer, another philosopher, described this tension as the conflict between the will and the representation of the world. The will is the driving force behind your actions, pushing you toward what you desire, while your representation is the way you understand the world, your mental image of what is possible. When your representation of the world tells you that greatness is beyond your reach, that ambition is an illusion, it creates a deep inner conflict. The will pushes you forward, but the representation holds you back, forming a kind of psychological paralysis. This paralysis, this struggle between your inner will and the limiting beliefs you've been conditioned to accept, is not just a personal issue, it's a social one. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian novel Brave New World, explored a society that dampens ambition by conditioning its citizens to remain content with mediocrity. Huxley saw a future where individuals would be pacified not through overt repression, but through subtle forms of cultural conditioning that would keep them from striving for anything greater. In such a society, ambition itself could be repressed, not by external force, but by internalized beliefs that good enough was enough. This same cultural conditioning exists in our world today. The pressure to fit in, to conform, to adhere to the expectations of others often creates a mental environment that stifles ambition before it can even take root. Society tells you to be practical, to be realistic, to be happy with what you have, while secretly encouraging you to ignore your deeper desires. You may not even realize it, but the societal messages you receive every day shape the way you view your own ambitions, and perhaps the very action that would propel you toward them. And then there's the existential weight of choice. Jean-Paul Sartre, the philosopher of existentialism, believed that humans are condemned to be free. This means that you are entirely responsible for who you become, for the choices you make. There's no divine script, no fate guiding you, only your own actions or inaction. Sartre's notion of bad faith involves denying your own freedom, pretending that you don't have a choice, that you're helpless or trapped. If you're ambitious but lazy, you're living in bad faith, convincing yourself that external factors are the cause of your paralysis, when in reality, it is your own fear of the unknown, your own refusal to embrace your freedom, that keeps you stuck. And what about Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who wrote about finding meaning in suffering? Frankl argued that the primary motivation in life is not pleasure, as Freud claimed, or power, as Nietzsche proposed, but meaning. If you're ambitious but lazy, it could be that your inaction is a symptom of a deeper existential crisis, a crisis in meaning. You want to achieve something, but you may not be clear on why. Without a clear sense of meaning, even the greatest ambitions can feel hollow, as though they are a means to an end without a true end. It's the lack of this meaning that paralyzes you, making even the smallest steps toward your goals seem like mountains to climb. The roots of this contradiction run deep, but they all stem from one central truth. Ambition without action is not just a problem of willpower. It is a problem of identity, of fear, of the meaning you ascribe to your own existence. If you want to break free from this trap, you must begin to face the deeper psychological and philosophical forces at play. Only then will you understand why, despite your ambitions, you remain frozen in place. You may think that your inability to act on your ambitions is a personal failing, a small flaw in your character, easily overcome with enough discipline or willpower. But the consequences of this paradox run deeper than that. They affect more than just your immediate goals. The toll it takes is quiet, insidious, and often invisible, slowly eroding your sense of self and shaping the world around you in ways you may not even realize. Let's start with the way this dynamic operates on the psychological level. When you consistently fail to act on your ambitions, a subtle but dangerous shift begins to happen in your brain. Neuroscientific research shows that our brains are wired to seek consistency between our actions and our beliefs. This is called cognitive dissonance, the tension that arises when our actions don't align with our values, beliefs, or intentions. The more you feel an internal conflict between your ambition and your inertia, the more discomfort you experience. But rather than act to resolve this discomfort, your brain may choose to protect you from the anxiety of failure by rationalizing your inaction. You might start telling yourself that it's not the right time, that your ambitions are unrealistic, or that other people have advantages you don't. Your brain, in an attempt to preserve your sense of self-worth, begins to offer you these comforting lies, convincing you that it's not your fault. But the cost of these rationalizations is high. Over time, your brain begins to rewire itself to accept inaction as a default state. Each time you choose not to act, your neural pathways strengthen the connection between comfort and inaction, creating a feedback loop that makes it increasingly harder to break free from the cycle. But the consequences of this cycle are not confined to the mind alone. The societal forces at play here are just as powerful, shaping your world in ways that you may not even be consciously aware of. We live in a world that prioritizes productivity, success, and achievement, yet paradoxically, it is also a world that promotes a culture of instant gratification. Social media, consumerism, and the constant bombardment of quick fixes feed into the belief that you can have what you want right now without effort. But the underlying reality is that true success, the kind of success that requires sustained effort and commitment, doesn't fit neatly into the shallow rhythms of instant gratification. Think of it like this. You're bombarded with images of success, people who appear to have everything you want, but you never see the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. You see their accomplishments, but not their failures. You see their victories, but not the countless hours of struggle and sacrifice that led to them. This constant exposure to idealized images of success leads to what psychologists call the availability heuristic, the cognitive bias that causes you to believe that what is most available to your mind, in this case, success without effort, is the most typical, the most achievable. But when your mind is repeatedly exposed to this skewed view of success, it distorts your perception of what is actually required to achieve greatness. You begin to internalize the idea that success should come easily, that it should feel effortless. As a result, when the hard work and effort required to reach your goals seem too much to bear, you retreat into the comfort of inaction. You may not even realize it, but you've already absorbed a societal blueprint for failure. The belief that if things aren't easy, they're not worth pursuing. This bias toward instant gratification also feeds into the cultural conditioning we discussed earlier. The world tells you that success is something you can buy, something you can achieve without sacrifice, as long as you've got the right tools, the right network, the right brand. But this culture of consumerism doesn't just affect how you perceive success. It also warps your sense of identity. You begin to see yourself not as someone on a path of personal growth, but as someone who is entitled to success, someone who should be able to bypass the struggle and leap straight to the rewards. What's worse is that in an age where self-worth is increasingly tied to external validation, likes, followers, career milestones, material possessions, you may begin to define your value based on a false standard. When you fail to act on your ambitions, the dissonance between your internal desires and your external reality begins to hollow out your sense of self. You feel like you're living a lie, not being true to who you could be, but stuck in a state of perpetual could have been. This silent erosion of your self-esteem is one of the most dangerous consequences of the paradox. You begin to internalize the idea that you are weak, incapable, or even undeserving of success. You become your own harshest critic, and that self-criticism feeds your inertia. This dissonance also takes its toll on your relationships. You may find that as your ambitions remain unacted upon, you start to feel isolated from others, even when you're surrounded by people. The distance between who you are and who you want to be becomes a chasm that you cannot bridge. You become less willing to engage with those who challenge you or encourage you to step up. Subconsciously, you might even feel resentful toward those who are achieving the things you desire, but haven't yet had the courage to pursue. But this isolation doesn't just exist on a personal level. It has societal repercussions as well. A culture that breeds unfulfilled ambition and stagnation is a culture that stagnates as a whole. When individuals are trapped in the paradox of ambition without action, entire communities lose their potential for innovation, growth, and progress. Imagine a world where everyone's dreams are deferred, where everyone's ambitions are held back by invisible barriers of fear and self-doubt. This is not just an individual problem, it's a collective one. When each person is frozen in place by their inner conflicts, society as a whole is left to drift aimlessly, unable to move forward. So, the consequences of ambition without action are not just psychological. They shape the very fabric of your reality. They influence how you perceive yourself, how you relate to others, and even how society functions. And as these consequences accumulate, the cost becomes more than just missed opportunities. It becomes a slow, almost imperceptible disintegration of who you are and what you could have become. But here's the question you must ask yourself. What are you willing to do to break free from this silent, destructive force? Are you ready to confront the consequences of your inaction and face them head-on? Because if you don't, you might just wake up one day, not to the life you dreamed of, but to a life that passed you by. And that is a tragedy you can still avoid if you choose to act. At this point, the question should be clear. If you are ambitious but lazy, how do you break free from this crippling cycle? How do you reconcile the ambition that burns inside you with the inertia that holds you in place? The answer, surprisingly, doesn't lie in more willpower or a sudden burst of self-discipline. It lies in a radical shift in perspective, a rebellion against everything you've been conditioned to believe about ambition, success, and the nature of action. To understand how to break free, you must first accept that the way you've been approaching your ambitions is flawed. You've been caught in a trap where your ideas about success are governed by the expectation that it should be straightforward, linear, and immediately rewarding. You want to act on your ambitions, but you're waiting for the perfect moment, the right set of circumstances, the ideal conditions for action. But life doesn't work that way. In fact, perfect conditions don't exist. Waiting for them only prolongs the cycle of inaction. The first step in breaking free from this trap is to acknowledge the paradox at its core. That ambition itself can become the very thing that paralyzes you. You have been conditioned to think that if you are truly ambitious, you must push yourself to the limit, always striving for the grand end goal. But this all-or-nothing mentality is what traps you in the cycle of procrastination. The truth is, breaking free doesn't require massive leaps. It requires micro steps, small, deliberate actions that are taken consistently, even if they seem insignificant at first. Take the example of someone like Leonardo da Vinci, who is often revered as one of the greatest minds in history. He was deeply ambitious, constantly envisioning grand creations, but he struggled with finishing projects. His journals are filled with hundreds of half-finished sketches, ideas that never reached fruition. And yet, despite this apparent failure to complete, he kept moving forward, learning, experimenting, thinking. Da Vinci understood that the journey itself, the ongoing process of exploration and action, was the true source of growth. His rebellion was in rejecting the idea that success could only be measured by completed projects or final products. Instead, he embraced the continuous act of creation as a form of success in itself. This is where the radical shift happens. You must redefine what success means to you. It is not about reaching a destination or attaining a specific goal. It's about embracing the process, the small, imperfect steps forward. It's about taking action not because you're guaranteed to succeed, but because the act of doing is where transformation occurs. In practical terms, this means that you stop waiting for the perfect moment or the ideal conditions to act. Instead, you start by setting small, manageable goals that require minimal effort to get started. You build momentum slowly, through action that doesn't require you to change everything at once. In the beginning, it's not about achieving big, flashy results. It's about breaking the inertia, doing something, however tiny, that disrupts the cycle of stasis. One of the most effective ways to do this is by following the principle of commitment devices, a concept explored by behavioral economist Dan Ariely. A commitment device is a mechanism that forces you to take action, even when you don't feel like it. This could be something as simple as telling someone else about your goals, making a small public commitment, or setting up an environment that encourages action. By creating external pressure to act, you bypass the internal resistance that often keeps you frozen in place. Think of a famous example of the artist Chuck Close, who suffered from a severe disability later in life. He couldn't use his hands the way he once had, and yet he continued to create. He didn't wait for the perfect circumstances. Instead, he adapted. He developed a system where he painted using a brush attached to a device that could be controlled with his mouth. Close's approach was grounded in a simple, rebellious idea. He would not let his circumstances dictate his ability to act. Even when everything seemed to be against him, he found a way to keep going. What Close demonstrated was that breaking free from the paralysis of ambition doesn't require grand gestures. It requires a willingness to keep going, even in the face of adversity, doubt, and discomfort. It's the rebellious act of taking small steps forward, of trusting that each action, no matter how small, has its own inherent value. But there's another crucial element to this rebellion. You must let go of perfection. Perfectionism is the quiet killer of progress. You've been raised to believe that anything worth doing must be done perfectly, that if your work isn't flawless, it isn't worth doing at all. But this idea paralyzes you. It makes you wait, hesitate, and second-guess yourself. Instead of moving forward with your ambitions, you stay stuck in the realm of what could be, because you're afraid of failing to meet an imagined ideal. The rebellion here is simple. Embrace imperfection. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. This means that perfection is a myth. You can never predict the outcomes of your actions, and even if you could, you would never have the full understanding of the process until you've experienced it firsthand. The act of moving forward, of failing and succeeding, of stumbling and learning along the way, is how you discover what your true potential looks like. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about embracing them as part of the journey. There are countless historical figures who understood this rebellion against perfection and inaction. Thomas Edison, for example, famously failed thousands of times before perfecting the electric light bulb. He didn't let his many failures stop him. Instead, he saw each failure as one step closer to success. His rebellion was in continuing to act, regardless of how imperfect or incomplete the journey might have seemed. And this, more than anything, is what you need to internalize: the idea that acting, regardless of how imperfect, moves you closer to your goals. So, how do you break free? You start by embracing small actions. You build momentum. You let go of perfection. You accept failure as part of the process. And above all, you rebel against the lie that ambition is something that happens only through big, perfect achievements. It happens through 1,000 small steps taken with courage, conviction, and the willingness to fail. This is your rebellion. It is the rebellion of the small, steady step. It is the rebellion of imperfection, of learning through action. And when you take that first step, no matter how small, you begin to unlock the power of your own ambition in a way that will reshape not only your future, but your very identity. So, what will it take for you to embrace this rebellion? What tiny step will you take today to break free from the cycle of ambition without action? The choice is yours, and in that choice lies the power to transform everything. There is a moment in every life, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift, where the weight of all you've learned, all you've struggled with, suddenly falls into place. It's as if the world around you refracts into something more clear, more vivid, and your understanding of everything you faced, your ambitions, your fears, your failures, suddenly transforms. You see the truth not with your mind, but with your soul, and in that instant, everything changes. If you've been caught in the paradox of ambition without action, if you've wrestled with the stifling forces of fear, inertia, and cultural conditioning, then this truth will feel like an unveiling, a revelation that cuts through all the layers of illusion you've built around yourself. The truth is this: ambition is not a destination. It is the very act of becoming. You've spent so much of your life looking at success as an endpoint, a final destination you can one day reach if only you have the right plan, the right drive, the right timing. But this idea, the notion that ambition is something you reach, has kept you locked in place, waiting for the right moment, the perfect conditions. What if success, what if fulfillment, is not about reaching a point on the horizon, but about moving forward into your own potential, however messy, imperfect, and uncertain that path may be? Consider this: the journey itself is the reward. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. Every misstep, every failure, every moment of doubt is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. The strength to continue, to persist, to act. Your ambition is not about a future outcome. It's about the courage to live your ambition every day, in every small, seemingly insignificant choice you make. The truth is that you are not waiting to become someone. You are already becoming. And the act of becoming is far more important than any final accomplishment could ever be. In the grand scheme of things, your ambitions are not just personal desires. They are part of a larger tapestry, a cosmic unfolding that is far beyond your comprehension. We often view our lives as isolated journeys, as singular narratives of success or failure. But the reality is far more interconnected, far more vast. You are a thread in a much larger weave, and your act of becoming, your choice to move forward, even in imperfection, is part of the fabric of the universe itself. Think about the stars for a moment. They are not born perfect. They don't shine immediately. Their journey toward brilliance is slow, fiery, and tumultuous. But every star, in its own time, bursts into existence and burns bright, not because it waited for the right conditions, but because it was shaped and forged by its own process of becoming. The same is true for you. You are not a finished product, nor should you expect to be. You are the result of every moment of action, every choice to step forward, even when you didn't know the outcome. This is where the ultimate realization takes root. Perfection is not the goal. Action is the goal. Movement is the goal. The fact that you are alive, that you are striving, is the very essence of your success. It is not the end result that defines you, but the courage to keep moving despite the uncertainty, despite the fear. And here's the beauty of it all. Once you accept this truth, once you internalize it with every fiber of your being, the paradox disappears. The dichotomy of ambition and laziness vanishes. There is no either/or in the equation anymore. There is only the process of becoming, the continuous unfolding of your potential, which has no final destination, only a perpetual state of growth. You will never be finished. And that in itself is the greatest liberation. The burden of perfection is lifted, the weight of finality dissolves, and you are free to act, not because you have to, but because it is the natural expression of who you are. This is the ultimate truth. You are already everything you seek. Your ambitions are not separate from you. They are the expression of your own deepest nature. To live fully, to act fully, is to express who you truly are. You are not someone who must wait or prepare or plan endlessly. You are someone who must be, in every moment, in every action, in every imperfect step forward. And so, when you stand at the edge of your own fear, looking at the vast expanse of possibility before you, ask yourself this: what would happen if you stopped waiting? What would happen if you embraced your imperfections and took the next step, even if you don't know where it will lead? The ultimate truth is that the very act of doing is a form of becoming who you were always meant to be. This is your revolution. This is your freedom. And it begins with a single imperfect, courageous step forward. So go ahead, take that step. The rest of your life is waiting for you to act and to become.